What happens in Washington and Beijing this week could reshape life on Ottawa farms and at our border checkpoints. And the Raptors just stole an overtime classic at home. Quick Ottawa weather: high 2 degrees Celsius, low -1 degree Celsius, no rain or snow. Let's start local. A new clinic on wheels is rolling out to support rural care south of Ottawa. The West Ottawa HART Hub launched a mobile clinic pilot to take pressure off Kemptville District Hospital, focusing on substance use and housing supports. The team includes a registered nurse, a social worker, and a case manager operating out of a fully equipped van. Kemptville was chosen as a fast-growing community with limited specialized services. If the pilot works, it could become a model for other rural pockets in eastern Ontario. Also in the media scene, CBC is beefing up local coverage with 3 new permanent bureaus in Oshawa, Sault Ste. Marie, and St. Catharines. They've added multi-platform reporter Diona Makalinga, who brings an investigative and podcast background. Welcome news for communities that have seen local newsrooms shrink. More reporters on the ground means more daylight on municipal decisions that affect everyday life. An update to the southwest of us: the OPP lifted a shelter-in-place advisory in Simcoe after responding to an active incident involving suspected armed individuals. No injuries were reported, but residents were asked to avoid the area as an increased police presence continued the investigation. National and cross-border now, and this is where international politics meet Canadian realities. U.S. President Donald Trump's recent moves threatening to annex Greenland and suspending U.S. support for 66 international organizations have rattled allies and adversaries alike. Many of those organizations work on climate and labor issues, and the U.S. pullback complicates global cooperation on problems that don't respect borders. For Canada, there are 2 big implications: Arctic security, especially with Greenland in the conversation, and the knock-on effects when the world's largest economy steps back from climate forums our researchers, provinces, and businesses rely on. At the same time, there's a bit of cross-border practical progress. Both countries say 2 new pre-clearance sites are set to begin this year. The U.S. calls Canadian pre-clearance critical to its border strategy, and for travelers that could mean shorter lines and earlier screening before you even step onto a plane, train, or bus. But Canadians' relationship with the U.S. is strained. An Ipsos poll suggests snowbirds and other travelers are reconsidering plans, some avoiding traditional winter trips to Florida or Arizona, opting for Mexico or staying put. The catalyst? Rhetoric like Trump's talk about making Canada the 51st state, which many found unwelcome. That sentiment is also showing up in spending patterns, with some Canadians shifting dollars away from U.S. destinations. All eyes are on Beijing this week. Prime Minister Mark Carney is heading to China in the first visit by a Canadian PM since 2017, and Saskatchewan farmers are watching closely. China slapped 100% tariffs on Canadian canola oil, canola meal, and peas, and 76% on canola seeds in retaliation for Canada's EV tariffs. Producers like Ryan Scragg say the Chinese market is effectively closed and prices have slumped to the point where canola and peas just don't pencil out. In 2024, China accounted for roughly $5 billion in Canadian canola exports. That number is expected to plunge this year unless there's a breakthrough. Ottawa's farm country will be measuring the trip's success in tariff relief, market access, and timing. Spring planting decisions aren't far off. On the home front, 2 sectors many of us interact with every week, restaurants and airlines, are feeling the squeeze. Restaurants Canada says about 41% of operators are operating at a loss or just breaking even. After the pandemic, 3/4 of Canadians report dining out less to save money, and inflation and labor shortages are compounding the problem. Nova Scotia spotlights the trend, but Ontario is exposed too. Dalhousie University projects up to 4,000 restaurant closures nationwide this year, with a heavy share here. Airlines are wrestling with rolling labor disputes. Air Transat, Air Canada, and WestJet have all faced cancellations tied to strikes or strike threats, adding uncertainty to travel plans already shaped by higher fares and those U.S.-Canada tensions. There are also two flashpoints stirring national debate. First, a drastic reduction in funding for First Nations educational supports in Ontario under Jordan's principle, from $122.1 million to $1.2 million within a year, after a federal bulletin narrowed eligible services. The Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation accuses Ottawa of underfunding on-reserve schools and perpetuating colonial harm. Second, immigration. The federal system is prioritizing francophone candidates outside Quebec, with 42% of permanent residence invitations going to French speakers, frustrating some higher-scoring non-francophone applicants. Supporters say it bolsters minority language communities. Critics call it unfair to candidates who met traditional score thresholds. Courts are busy too. In Manitoba, a judge ordered the province to reconsider how it handled polar bear viewing permits for lazy bear expeditions, criticizing the wildlife branch's rationale and noting there was no evidence that cutting tundra vehicles improves conservation outcomes. In Ontario, the Supreme Court of Canada will hear an appeal from the Ontario Place Protectors Coalition, challenging the constitutionality of the Rebuilding Ontario Place Act. The legislation shields parts of the redevelopment from court review. The coalition argues that violates the Constitution and sidesteps environmental and heritage protections. Lower courts said political grievances aren't for judges to solve, but the Supreme Court's decision could reset the boundaries between policymaking and accountability. Sports to close us out, and we'll start at Scotiabank Arena. The Toronto Raptors outlasted the Philadelphia 76ers 116-115 in overtime. Scotty Barnes returned from a knee issue and was everywhere. 31 points, 8 assists, 7 boards, and hit the winning free throw with 0.8 seconds left. Jamal Shed poured in a career-high 22. Toronto did it despite a brutal 5 for 32 night from deep and a short-handed lineup. R.J. Barrett, Brandon Ingram, and Jakob Poeltl were out, and rookie Jacoby Walter left early with a right hip pointer. Tyrese Maxey dropped 38 for Philly, who were also without Joel Embiid and Paul George. It's the Raptors' third straight home win over the Sixers, and a gutsy one given the injury list. Out west, the Winnipeg Jets edged the New Jersey Devils 4-3 to finally snap an NHL record skid of 13 straight one-goal losses and pick up back-to-back wins for the first time since mid-November. Tanner Pearson's third-period goal stood up, with strong nights from Alex Iafallo, Jonathan Toews, and Gabriel Velarde, and 24 saves by Connor Hellebuck. We'll be watching 2 threads this week: results from Prime Minister Carney's talks in Beijing, especially anything tangible for prairie growers, and details on those new pre-clearance projects that could change how we move through the border. If you've got eyes on the Kemptville mobile clinic rollout, or a story about how restaurant closures are affecting your neighborhood, send us a note. That's it for today. High 2 degrees Celsius, low -1 degree Celsius, no rain or snow. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.